The bell above the Pinebrook Cafe door still jingled at 6:47 a.m., but it now echoed a peculiar tension. Most mornings, it was just the soft rhythm of a town waking up. Today, though, a brisk gust of cold air slammed it shut behind Brandon Hale, the new, self-important director of the local Veterans Outreach Center. He breezed past two retirees nursing coffee, his folder overflowing with printouts, a permanent furrow of self-importance creasing his brow. "Big week, people," he boomed, dropping his folder with a clatter onto the counter. "You wouldn't believe how behind we are on these Veterans Day logistics." He scanned the room, his eyes snagging on the quiet figure in the corner booth. Ellie Green, a woman in her late 60s, sat hunched slightly over a newspaper, her silver hair pulled back from a face etched with the subtle lines of a life lived with quiet dignity. Her old, faded navy blue flight jacket, its circular patch almost worn smooth, seemed to absorb the cafe's early morning light. Ellie's presence was a fixture, as reliable as the scent of brewing coffee. "Still got the throne, I see," Brandon muttered, loud enough to carry. "Must be nice to have a permanent table." Diana, the cafe owner, a woman with a no-nonsense smile and a heart of gold, didn't miss a beat. She placed Ellie's usual breakfast, buttermilk pancakes, no butter, 2 crisp bacon slices, in front of her with practiced care. "That woman once pulled my niece, Lily, off Miller Street when a car jumped the curb," Diana said, her voice low but firm, her gaze fixed on Brandon. "Broke her own arm catching her. Never said a word. Just paid her tab and went home." Brandon blinked, caught mid-chuckle. "Huh. Didn't know that." "Lot of things you don't know, honey," Diana replied, turning back to the counter, leaving Brandon to stew in the unexpected silence. The mist still clung low in Maple Creek Memorial Park at 6:03 a.m., pooling around the bronze statues and along the winding gravel paths. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic scrape of Ellie Green's gloved hand brushing dead leaves from the weathered wooden back of Bench 7. Her movements were slow, measured, a testament to years of quiet service. She carried a canvas tote, brimming with folded cloths, a battered thermos, and a small American flag, crisp from its packaging. Kneeling before the solemn plaque of Sergeant Marion Lyon, a female soldier lost too soon, Ellie meticulously wiped dew from the bronze, polished the name, and carefully straightened the flower vase. One marigold had fallen during the weekend wind. She gently replaced it, adjusting the miniature flag to stand perfectly straight. "Ma'am, this area is off-limits until the city team finishes their layout." Brandon Hale's voice cut through the morning stillness, sharp and impatient. He strode forward, clipboard clutched like a badge, his tan sport coat too new for the raw morning. Ellie rose slowly, with the unhurried patience of someone who'd faced far louder commands. She didn't speak, simply offering a small nod and gesturing to the vase. Brandon scanned the area. "We're taping zones for the Veterans Day program, chairs, folding stage, speakers. Legal says no non-credentialed volunteers until setup is signed off. Liability, you understand." Ellie reached into her tote and pulled out a small wooden sign, handwritten with careful, blocky strokes, "Remember them." She stuck it gently into the soft ground beside the walkway. Brandon squinted. "Did you make that?" "It's non-standard." "She makes one every year," a woman's voice called from behind the hedges. Claire Parker, the park supervisor, stepped out from between the trees, work gloves tucked into her back pocket. "And I leave it right where she puts it every time." Brandon hesitated. "Still, if it's not city-issued." Claire walked past him, picking up a stray piece of trash. "So, issue it." Brandon turned back to Ellie, but the older woman had already moved on, now kneeling beside another plaque. This one read, "Lieutenant Daniel Hayes, 1955 to 1980. Her jacket pulled tight as she leaned forward, revealing the faded circular patch again, its stitching nearly worn smooth. From a nearby bench, an elderly gentleman, Mr. Jensen, bundled under 2 scarves, raised a shaky hand in salute. He watched Ellie with the steady reverence of a morning ritual. That woman's been doing this since before my oldest was born, Claire murmured to Brandon, her voice low. Never asked for a thank you. Brandon crossed his arms. Still wearing that old jacket, huh? His voice rose, meant to be heard. Claire narrowed her eyes but said nothing. It's just an old jacket, Brandon scoffed, scribbling something on his clipboard. Ellie paused mid-wipe. She turned slightly, glanced down at the frayed edge of the patch, and pulled the collar higher with a slow, smooth motion. Then she stood, nodded to Mr. Jensen, and walked toward the edge of the park without a word, leaving Brandon holding the handmade sign, staring at its uneven letters. The breeze cut through Maple Creek Memorial Park like a quiet blade. Rows of paper flags, meticulously planted by the middle schoolers, fluttered along the pathways. Folding chairs creaked beneath anxious feet. The choir, fidgeting in matching navy cardigans, hummed softly. The air carried the scent of freshly raked leaves, mixed with the tang of metal from the folding stage and old wood from the benches. The honor guard stood at attention, their polished shoes aligned like compass points, rifles held upright in solemn silence. It was Thursday, November 9th, and the town was observing Veterans Day, in its usual small, earnest, and slightly uncoordinated way. Brandon Hale stood at the podium, one hand clamped on the microphone stand, the other flipping note cards with increasing speed. His tan sport coat was too light for the chill, and too new to inspire confidence. He'd already stumbled once, mispronouncing Sergeant Oblonsky as Sergeant Oblovsky. Now, trying to regain his rhythm, he announced, "Please join me in welcoming our guest of honor, retired four-star General Victoria Vicky Sanders, a decorated veteran of the Special Operations Community, recipient of the Medal of Honor, Silver Star, and Distinguished Service Cross." Polite applause rippled through the crowd, veterans and their spouses, school teachers, city staff, a few curious teens with hoodies half-zipped under their jackets. The general emerged from the side path, flanked by two local ROTC cadets. She walked with calm, undeniable authority, her coat heavy with insignia, silver hair pulled back in a single, elegant braid, eyes scanning the crowd with the focused intensity of someone used to assessing a battlefield. She ascended the platform steps, nodded once to Brandon, and then paused. Mid-step, her gaze locked. Something on the far right bench near the ancient oak tree. Ellie Green sat there, her hands resting atop a cane she hadn't used the day before. Her old navy blue flight jacket was zipped halfway, the faded circular patch just barely visible beneath her folded arms. Her head was bowed slightly, her cap pulled low, not out of disrespect, but something quieter, something older and deeply ingrained. The general didn't speak. She stepped off the riser. The crowd, unsure, stilled. The band trailed off. The air tightened, palpable with unspoken anticipation. General Sanders walked slowly across the grass, her boots making no sound. The only noise was the breeze teasing the mic cable and the flag above them, flapping once, then falling silent. She stopped before Ellie, straightened her posture, and brought her right hand to her brow in a crisp, precise salute, the kind that needed no stage, no audience, to give it profound weight. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman clutched her husband's sleeve. A teacher dropped her program. One child, no older than 8, pointed and whispered, "That's Ms. Ellie from the cafe." Brandon froze, his mouth opening, then shutting again. The note card slipped from his hand, scattering like autumn leaves. General Sanders held her salute longer than protocol demanded, a silent tableau of profound respect. Then she slowly lowered it and spoke, her voice steady but not loud, cutting through the stunned silence. "That patch," she said, her eyes fixed on Ellie, "was only given to 7 women. She's the last one standing." Silence spread in a widening ring. A boy in the front row leaned toward his friend and whispered, "That's the lady from the cafe." Ellie didn't shift. For a moment, she seemed carved from the same bronze as the statues nearby. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she nodded once, stood slowly, and returned the salute, just as a single trumpet began to play taps. The corner booth at Pinebrook Cafe was empty, a void that felt heavier than usual. But on the table, where pancakes typically rested, lay Ellie Green's old navy blue flight jacket. The faded circular patch was exposed now, not hidden by folds or shadows, lit by the weak morning light filtering through the cafe windows. Next to it, a blank diner receipt bore only a printed timestamp and, in looping cursive, the name Ellie Green. Brandon Hale stepped inside with a hesitance he hadn't worn the day before. The bell chimed with its usual ring, but the diner was quieter now, as though the building itself had paused to listen. He didn't scan the room as he usually did. His eyes landed instantly on Ellie's booth. He approached slowly, setting his messenger bag on the edge of the opposite bench, sitting down like a man unsure of how to occupy a sacred space. His eyes flickered over the jacket, creased at the elbows, threadbare at the cuffs. Beside the receipt, tucked just under the hem, was a napkin folded twice. He lifted it, written in the same ink, just 5 words, "Some honors don't come with ceremony." He exhaled slowly, leaning back, arms crossed, the jacket still untouched. Diana appeared with 2 mugs, one already half full. She set one in front of Brandon. "Didn't think I'd see you here before 9, she said gently. Brandon didn't look up. "Did she say anything before she left it?" "Just asked for your usual table." Diana paused, pulling up a chair from an empty table and sitting down. "Didn't say much." Then again, she never did. Brandon nodded faintly. "How long have you known?" "Known what?" Diana replied, a soft smile playing on her lips. "I don't know what I knew. Just enough. Enough to trust the quiet." Brandon looked over, his brow creased. "You once said she helped your niece." Diana nodded, her eyes softening. "Lily was 6, playing too close to Miller Street. A car came out of nowhere, jumped the curb. Ellie moved so fast, caught her mid-step. Broke her own arm catching her, didn't tell anyone, wouldn't let me call an ambulance. Just smiled and said, 'It's just a sprain.'" Brandon's fingers traced the edge of the folded napkin. "And you never told anyone?" Diana shrugged. "Wasn't my story to tell." The front bell chimed again. Claire Parker, the park supervisor, entered in a navy work jacket, shaking off the last bits of drizzle. She glanced at the booth, then made her way over. "I figured I'd find you 2 here," she said, sliding into the seat next to Diana. "Figured I might as well add my piece." Brandon gestured toward the jacket. "Be my guest." Claire folded her hands. 2 years ago, a week before Christmas, a storm hit. Power went down at Maple Creek. I couldn't get the maintenance crew until Monday. But Saturday morning, every headstone cleared, every path shoveled. Every single one. Diana smiled knowingly. "You're saying, Ellie." She even relit the entrance lanterns on her own dime. "I only found the receipt days later." She signed it E. Green, Night Crew. Brandon stared at the patch again. She was right there the whole time. Every day. She never left. Claire said quietly, she just didn't need a spotlight. The radio behind the counter shifted tracks, a slow, wistful tune from the 1940s began to play, something swingy but subdued. Older customers recognized it instantly. Heads nodded, feet tapped gently. Brandon reached for the jacket. His hands moved carefully, as though lifting something fragile. He refolded the sleeves, brushed a few crumbs from the seat cushion, then stood. Across the room, a young girl, no older than 7, raised her hand and waved. Lily, Diana's niece, grinned shyly. She wore a denim jacket with 2 small American flag pins on the collar. Brandon blinked, then nodded once in return. He turned back to the table, holding the jacket against his chest. "I need to find her." The town library, a stone-trimmed building smelling of old pages and floor wax, offered a quiet refuge from the damp afternoon. The door gave its usual squeal as Brandon stepped inside, clutching Ellie's napkin in his coat pocket like a pressed flower. He rubbed his hands together, the warmth of the library a welcome contrast to the cold, bright sun outside that cast long, diagonal shadows across the tile. Grace Harper, the senior librarian, sat behind the reference desk. Her gray hair was pulled into a neat coil, and the little bronze owl pin on her lapel looked older than the card catalog itself. She didn't look up from her crossword puzzle. "Took you long enough," she said without preamble. Brandon blinked. "Excuse me." Grace finally met his eyes, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "I figured you'd be in by noon, latest." A woman leaves a coat and a riddle, someone's bound to want answers. She paused, then added, "Diana called. Said your face had the look of someone trying to read Braille with gloves on." Brandon couldn't help a small laugh. "I'm looking for anything about Ellie Green. Old articles, military records, anything." Grace's smile deepened. "I was in school with her sister. Knew the family. Quiet folks. Too quiet sometimes." She stood slowly. "Come on. You won't find her on Google, but the truth's curled up in drawer 6B. She led him down a narrow corridor lined with faded posters from literacy campaigns past. In the archive room, dust motes danced in the shafts of winter light like bits of powdered sugar. Grace powered up the microfiche reader, feeding a reel with practiced ease. Start around 78. Southeast Asia operations. Classified missions. Look for bylines from a reporter named Winslow. He was local, but he followed up on missing soldiers. Brandon scrolled through headlines, his eyes adjusting to the pale blue glow. It was slow work, quiet, rhythmic. The hum of the machine was the only sound. He passed reports of local council meetings, school bake sales, and forgotten football games. Then, somewhere between page 47 and 53, he paused. "Here," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Grace leaned over. The headline read, "7 rescued from covert recon mission, female hero remains unnamed." Beneath it, a single paragraph detailed the harrowing event. Survivors report an unidentified female reconnaissance officer navigated an improvised evacuation under blackout conditions after their commanding officer was killed. The officer carried 2 wounded teammates over 3 miles of uneven, hostile terrain before interception. The woman wore a patch, a circular insignia not yet documented in formal inventory. Grace whistled low. "That's her all right." "Knew it." Brandon leaned back, a mixture of awe and regret washing over him. "Why didn't anyone ever follow up?" "They did," Grace replied, her gaze distant, fixed on some memory. "But she never answered the door. She moved around a lot back then. After a while, folks just stopped trying. Some things, she told me, aren't meant to be public knowledge. Not for her, anyway." Later that afternoon, Brandon found Ellie's address listed under a post office box number. The house, a small rental off Chestnut Street, stood behind a sagging gate and a porch with no railing. The mailbox clattered empty when he opened it. He knocked anyway. No answer. The curtains inside were drawn. He stepped back, unsure of what he'd expected. A woman in uniform at the door. A fire glowing through the window. "Looking for Ellie," a voice called from next door. Old John, an older man with a thick coat and a cane, leaned against his porch post, watching him over the top of rimless glasses. "Yes, I'm Brandon. I work with the city." "John," the man said, offering a curt nod. "Known Ellie since 76. She won't be back today." Brandon stepped closer. "Do you know where she is, sir?" Old John tapped the end of his cane on the steps. "Sunday, 3 p.m. Veteran Section Cemetery up on Hillcrest. Rain or shine, that's where she'll be. Every Sunday. Far as I can remember." As Brandon turned to go, old John added, his voice softer, "She's not hiding, son. She just doesn't need to be found." Brandon nodded and walked back down the path, his breath curling ahead of him in the cold air. Back at home, he sat at the kitchen table, a pencil in hand, and opened his calendar. He circled the coming Sunday with firm, deliberate strokes. She won't walk alone this time. At exactly 3 p.m., Ellie Green was there. Jacketless, her hands clasped behind her back, her eyes fixed on the name she touched every year, Sergeant Marion Lyon. Marion's stone had grown smooth over the decades, the engraving softened by weather and memory. Ellie stood motionless, the wind teasing at her shirt cuffs, a single white rose resting gently against her thigh. The cemetery around her was quiet, blanketed in gold leaves that spiraled slowly from the trees and gathered at the corners of headstones like unspoken prayers. Brandon Hale approached without fanfare. His footsteps crunched gently along the gravel path, but Ellie didn't turn. When Brandon reached her side, he didn't speak. He simply stood, hands clasped in front, his own white rose cradled in his palm. They stood like that for a long time, two solitary figures in a sea of silent tributes, connected by the shared weight of remembrance. Eventually, Ellie placed her rose down at the base of the grave. Brandon did the same. The blooms leaned toward one another, white against the gray granite. Ellie broke the silence, her voice rough but steady. She was 23. Had a laugh that cracked through static. Called me Little E even though I was younger. Carried her family's photo in her helmet. Never asked who they were. Always meant to. She paused, a distant look in her eyes. "I come every year," Ellie continued, her gaze sweeping over the rows of stones. "Because I can." She turned then, just enough to see Brandon fully. "Why are you here?" Brandon answered simply, his voice low and sincere. "Because I should have listened sooner." Ellie didn't nod or frown. She simply held his gaze for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Then, she turned back to the grave. But she didn't walk away either. The silence that settled between them was different now, not one of disconnect, but of a quiet, shared understanding. That evening, the high school auditorium was filled with the kind of restless energy only teenagers could generate. Rows of students shifted in plastic seats, programs fanned like playing cards. Teachers lined the back walls, and parents dotted the aisles. A banner stretched across the stage, "Career Day, Voices Who Serve." Ellie Green stood off stage, arms folded. She wore a charcoal sweater, plain slacks, and no name tag. Brandon Hale joined her, holding a folded letter. "You sure about this?" Brandon asked, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. Ellie replied without hesitation. "One condition." Brandon smiled. No applause. Ellie stepped to the podium. The murmurs quieted. She adjusted the mic once, her movements deliberate. "I was asked to talk about service," she began, her voice clear, not loud, carrying easily through the auditorium. "Not all service wears a uniform. Sometimes it's doing the quiet job when no one's looking." She paused, letting the stillness settle, her gaze sweeping over the young faces. "When I was 19, I carried a woman 3 miles through hostile territory. She was shot, couldn't walk. Told me over and over, 'Don't stop. Keep moving.' I listened. Never forgot it." She looked out at the students, scanning faces, young and unweathered. "You'll be told to speak up. Sometimes you should. Other times, you'll need to shut up and carry. And if you're a woman, sometimes you carry twice the weight without anyone noticing." There was a hush, not from confusion, but a profound understanding. Brandon stepped forward, unfolding the letter. "This is from General Victoria Sanders," he said, his voice ringing with a new reverence. "The best heroes don't speak loudly. They listen. They notice what's needed and do it without asking for credit. Ellie Green reminds us what service truly means." Near the back, A girl wiped her eyes. A boy in an ROTC uniform sat straighter. A hand went up from the second row. A lanky student with glasses and a notebook asked, "What did the patch mean?" Ellie looked at him for a moment, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "It meant I went where others wouldn't," she said. "And that I was a woman, so I simply couldn't afford to fail." The room held its breath. No one clapped. No one needed to. Later that week, Brandon returned to the library. Grace Harper met him at the door with a smile and a key. "North display case," she said. "Left shelf." Inside the glass, folded with care, lay Ellie's old navy blue flight jacket. The faded circular patch faced outward now, lit by a single overhead bulb. Beneath it, etched in brass, were just 3 words, "She reminded us." At his side, Lily, Diana's niece, tugged at Brandon's sleeve. "Can I wear a jacket like hers someday?" Ellie never needed applause. And maybe that's what made her quiet presence ring louder than any speech ever could. What some called just an old jacket became a reminder that dignity and sacrifice rarely wear signs around their necks. Kindness doesn't always announce itself, and worth isn't stitched in newness. Sometimes it's the worn things, the weathered faces, and the ones who stand in silence that carry the most weight. If this story stayed with you, maybe it's because you too have known someone who taught more by showing up than speaking out. And perhaps, like Ellie, we all have a chance each day to remind someone what quiet honor looks like. Please comment below to share your thoughts, respect the veterans in your life, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.